A recap of chapter 18. This chapter gives us an account of how young Catherine is raised at Thrushcross Grange. Her father dotes on her, educates her, and gives in to all her whims and fancies. She is zealously guarded and always chaperoned. She is never out of Thrushcross Grange and does not even recognize the word Gimmerton. Her outdoor excursions are limited to Thrushcross Grange parks. She is indulged and has airs of any indulged child, particularly with servants. Slowly, however, she grows curious about the far off landscapes she can see from the windows and is particularly keen on going to Penitent Crags. The path goes via Wuthering Heights, and so Linton puts off taking her there, saying she is not yet old enough for such an excursion. Linton, in the meanwhile, receives a letter from her sister informing that she is sick and will die soon and would like to say goodbye. She asks him to take charge of her son. When Edgar Linton is away for 3 weeks, Catherine takes her entourage of pony and dogs and leaves on her own without Mrs. Dean's knowledge for Penitent Crags. Mrs. Dean finds her at Wuthering Heights in company of Hareton and a female servant. She assumes, that is, little Cathy assumes Hareton to be the owner, and when that is not confirmed, calls him a servant and orders both of them around, like she would at Thrushcross Grange. She has her first encounter with the real world when they refuse and is told Hareton is her cousin. This information greatly distresses Cathy, who does not believe it. Chapter 19. Wuthering Heights. A letter, edged with black, announced the day of my master's return. Isabella was dead, and he wrote to bid me to get mourning for his daughter and arrange a room and other accommodations for his youthful nephew. Catherine ran wild with joy at the idea of welcoming her father back, and indulged most sanguine anticipations of the innumerable excellences of her real cousin. The evening of their expected arrival came. Since early morning she had been busy ordering her own small affairs, and now, attired in her new black frock, poor thing, her aunt's death impressed her with no definite sorrow. She obliged me by constant worrying to walk with her down through the grounds to meet them. Linton is just 6 months younger than I am, she chattered, as we strolled leisurely over the swells and hollows of mossy turf under shadow of the trees. How delightful it will be to have him for a playfellow. Aunt Isabella sent Papa a beautiful lock of his hair, and it was lighter than mine, more flaxen, and quite as fine. I have it carefully preserved in a little glass box, and I have often thought what pleasure it would be to see its owner. Oh, I am happy, and Papa, dear, dear Papa. Come, Ellen, let us run. Come, run. She ran and returned and ran again, many times before my sober footsteps reached the gate. And then she seated herself on the grassy bank beside the path and tried to wait patiently. But that was impossible. She couldn't be still a minute. "How long they are!" she exclaimed. "Ah, I see some dust on the road. They are coming." "No, when will they be here? Maybe not go a little way, half a mile, Ellen? Only just half a mile. Do say yes to that clump of birches at the turn." I refused staunchly, and at length her suspense was ended. The travelling carriage rolled in sight. Miss Cathy shrieked and stretched out her arms as soon as she caught her father's face looking from the window. He descended, nearly as eager as herself, and a considerable interval lapsed ere they had a thought to spare for any one but themselves. When they exchanged caresses, I took a peep in to see after Linton. He was asleep in a corner, wrapped in a warm fur-lined cloak, as if it had been winter. a pale, delicate, effeminate boy who might have been taken for my master's younger brother. So strong was the resemblance. But there was a sickly peevishness in his aspect that Edgar Linton never had. The latter saw me looking and having shaken hands advised me to close the door and leave him undisturbed, for the journey had fatigued him. Kathy would fain have taken one glance, but the father told her to come on, and they walked together up the park, while I hastened to prepare the servants. "Now, darling," said Mr. Linton, addressing his daughter, as they halted at the bottom of the front steps. "Your cousin is not so strong or so merry as you are, and he has lost his mother, remember, a very short time since. Therefore, don't expect him to play and run about with you directly, and don't harass him much by talking. Let him be quiet this evening at least, will you?" "Yes, yes, papa," answered Catherine, "but I do want to see him, and he hasn't once looked out." The carriage stopped, and the sleeper, being aroused, was lifted to the ground by his uncle. "This is your cousin, Cathy Linton," he said, putting their little hands together. "She's fond of you already. And mind you, don't grieve her by crying tonight. Try to be cheerful now. The travelling is at an end, and you have nothing to do but rest and amuse yourself as you please." "Let me go to bed then," answered the boy, shrinking from Catherine's salute, and he put his fingers to his eyes to remove incipient tears. "Come, come, there's a good child," I whispered, leading him in. "You'll make her weep too. See how sorry she is for you." I do not know whether it was sorrow for him, but his cousin put on as sad a countenance as himself, and returned to her father. All three entered and mounted to the library, where tea was laid ready. I proceeded to remove Linton's cap and mantle, and placed him on a chair by a table, but he was no sooner seated than he began to cry afresh. My master inquired what was the matter. "I can't sit on a chair," sobbed the boy. "Go to the sofa then, and Ellen shall bring you some tea," answered his uncle patiently. He had been greatly tired during the journey, I felt convinced, by his fretful, ailing charge. Linton slowly trailed himself off and lay down. Kathy carried a footstool and her cup to his side. At first she sat silent, but that could not last. She had resolved to make a pet of her little cousin, and she would have him to be. And she commenced stroking his curls and kissing his cheeks, and offering him tea in her saucer like a baby. This pleased him, for this he was not much better. He dried his eyes and lightened into a faint smile. "Oh, he'll do very well," said the master to me after watching them a minute. "Very well if we can keep him, Ellen. The company of a child of his own age will instill new spirit into him soon, and by wishing for strength he'll gain it." "Ay, if we can keep him," I messed to myself, and sore misgivings came over me that there was a slight hope of that. And then I thought, however, will that weakling live at Wuthering Heights between his father and Harrington? What playmates and instructors they'll be! Our doubts were presently decided even earlier than I expected. I had just taken the children upstairs after tea was finished, and seen Linton asleep. He would not suffer me to leave him till that was the case. I had come down and was standing by the table in the hall, lighting a bedroom candle for Mr. Edgar, when a maid stepped out of the kitchen and informed me that Mr. Heathcliff's servant Joseph was at the door and wished to speak with the master. "I shall ask him what he wants first," I said in considerable trepidation. "A very unlikely hour to be troubling people, and the instant they have returned from a long journey. I don't think the master can see him." Joseph had advanced through the kitchen as I uttered these words, and now presented himself in the hall. He was donned in his Sunday garments, and his most sanctimonious and sourest face, and holding his hat in one hand and his stick in the other, he proceeded to clean his shoes on the mat. Good evening, Joseph, I said coldly. What business brings you here tonight? It's Master Linton, our mum spake tull, he answered, waving me disdainfully aside. Mr. Linton is going to bed. Unless you have something particular to say, I'm sure he won't hear it now, I continued. You had better sit down in there and entrust your message to me. Which is Ram? Pursued the fellow, surveying the range of closed doors. I perceived he was bent on refusing my mediation, so very reluctantly I went up to the library and announced the unseasonable visitor, advising that he should be dismissed till next day. Mr. Linton had no time to empower me to do so, for he mounted close at my heels and, pushing into the apartment, planted himself at the far side of the table, which his two fists clapped on the head of his stick, and began in an elevated tone as if anticipating opposition. Heathcliff has sent me for his lad, and I mustn't go back but him. Edgar Linton was silent a minute. An expression of exceeding sorrow overcast his features. He would have pitied the child on his own account, but recalling Isabella's hopes and fears and anxious wishes for her son, and her commendations of him to his care, he grieved bitterly at the prospect of yielding him up, and searched in his heart how it might be avoided. No plan offered itself. The very exhibition of any desire to keep him would have rendered the claimant more peremptory. There was nothing left but to resign him. However, he was not going to rouse him from his sleep. Tell Mr. Heathcliff, he answered calmly, that his son shall come to Wuthering Heights tomorrow. He is in bed and too tired to go the distance now. You may tell him that the mother of Linton desired him to remain under my guardianship, and at present his health is very precarious. No, said Joseph, giving a thud with his prop on the floor and assuming an authoritative air. No, that man's not Heathcliff means not Canton mother and your brother, but he'll have his lad, and I must take him. So now you know. You shall not tonight, answered Linton decisively. Walk down the stairs at once and repeat to your master what I have said. Ellen, show him down, go. And aiding the indignant elder with a lift by the arm, he rid the room of him and closed the door. Very well, shouted Joseph as he slowly drew off. Tomorrow morning he come in hissing, and thrust him out if you dare. End of chapter 19.